Welcome to the Communicating Earth podcast. This is a podcast by and for climate communicators. This week, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Harry Waters of Renewable English. I first met Harry at the Change Now conference in Paris last year, where he was giving a talk about how to more effectively bring climate education to the children of the world. Harry, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So tell me a bit more about that, first of all. Like, how do you go about, bringing climate, nature, the mess we're in, to the people who are going to suffer the worst of it, our children?
Oof. And their teachers, I think, is the important part there. So
Okay.
it's a tricky one because teachers have so much work to do. There's so much to do. They're always working. They're focused on exams. They've got course books to get through, and those course books don't really provide the support that they need. They don't have anywhere near enough information on the climate crisis, on any social justice issue, to be perfectly honest. They, particularly in English language teaching, which is where I originally specialized, it was all about grammar and vocabulary and those kind of things. So what I've tried to do is weave environmentalism through all of those traditional topics. So if you ever open an English course book, an English textbook, then you will see fashion, you will see food, you will see sport, you will see all of these endless topics. But there's never any mention of the impact that each of those topics have. So my idea is to try and make sure that we can weave sustainability through each of those different areas, and beyond that, not just sustainability, but all of these social justice issues that we're facing. And the great thing about English language teaching is it's something that, rightly or wrongly, reaches every single corner of the globe, if the globe were to have corners, but it doesn't, because it's it's a globe. So yeah, more or less, that's it.
Very good. So you're an English teacher, not a maths teacher, right?
Yeah, definitely. Although that said, I do try and integrate maths
Okay.
into my English lessons as well, as with other subjects, because, as I said, it started out as being an English teacher, but I think the issue is that it's cross curricular. It can't just be in English classes. It can't just be in science classes. It needs to be in every single class. And the answer isn't, we need a separate sustainability GCSE where we learn about sustainability. We don't need that. What we need to do is use the existing topics that we have and integrate sustainability and climate awareness throughout that, so we can empower young students to stand up and speak for what they really believe in.
So this podcast is all about climate communication. Talk to me about, like, do you consider teachers to be communicators first and foremost, or where does communication come into the teaching sort of armory?
I think it is right up there, like in the top levels. The best teachers aren't the ones who have studied the most, or passed the most exams, or learnt the most stuff. It's the ones who can communicate those ideas to their students. They're the ones who can take these complex issues, be it maths, geography, science, and make it that it's simple enough for any student to understand. Make it so any student can take that information, assimilate it, and be able to apply it to their own life.
And do you think that, principles in your work could help our audience? So our audience is communication professionals out there in the big bad world. Do you think there are principles there that you could share that would help them in their work as well?
I really think that, if you take the outlook of a teacher as a communicator, then it is fundamentally what you want to be doing. You want to be making something very complex and difficult easy for the masses. You want everybody to be able to understand it. So, if you're trying to communicate these terrifying, complex ideas, then if you look at it, imagine you're a teacher and you're speaking to a room of 30 teenagers or 7-year-olds or whatever level you want it to be. You need to dumb it down, basically. I don't mean to sound bad there, but you need to make sure that what you're communicating is on the base level for everybody in the room. You need to make sure that everyone can understand what you're saying, and you're not going to be doing that with complex language. You're not going to be doing that with wild statistics. It needs to be with things that people understand. You need to be helping people understand these complex issues with stories, with images if necessary, but it needs to be communicated in a way that everybody can understand, and it needs to be engaging. Because I'll tell you one thing, I loved history at school. Mr. Meenan was an amazing teacher. He was the one that would, every now and again, he'd bring in the video back like we had back in the day. He'd roll it in there and we'd sit there and we'd waste 4 classes watching Schindler's List or whatever it was we were doing. But, we did it for a reason. And Mr. Meenan's classes were engaging, and we learned about history, and we learned about the mistakes from history, and we learned about how not to repeat them. I look at my daughter now, who's 12. At the moment, she's learning about the Greeks and the Romans, and all at the same time. And she had an exam the other day, and we were, I was going to say revising for the exam, but it was more rehearsing for the exam.
Okay.
Because she had 5 pages of the textbook that she had to learn and turn into notes and then regurgitate in her exam. And, she said something, and I said, "Oh, but can't you just, say that your own way?" She's like, no, it has to be how it says it in the textbook. And I just thought, that's not learning. You're not being communicated properly. You're not being taught how to learn from history. What you're doing is regurgitating a course book, which isn't teaching, it isn't learning, and fundamentally is bad. And if we look at climate communicators, if that's what we're hoping people are going to do, they're just going to learn the facts and regurgitate those facts, that nobody will do anything about it. We'll just see, billions and trillions and think, well, that's a big number.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to have another cup of tea.
So I don't know if you know the work of Chris Mayer, who works out of University College London. So he's done this big thesis that it's stories of climate action that inspire more action. And so each week we like to bring a tale of climate action within your work as a case study, I suppose. So what's yours? Can you tell me a bit about a project specifically related to climate action that you've worked on?
I can. I mean, as a teacher that works with students across the globe, there are a few. I could probably list a few, but I think I'd like to talk about the one that I'm working on now, and I have been working on for the last few years, and that is with a school, or a chain of schools in Turkey called Bilnet Schools, and they have turned their annual science fair away from being traditional science, volcanoes and all those things that we used to do with vinegar and bicarbonate, and woo, it was brilliant. They've moved away from that, and for their whole middle school, so 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, what they do now is all of the projects are based on climate action and sustainability, and in turn, youth empowerment. Because when I started as a teacher within the climate realm, I wanted to make sure people understood climate change, whereas that's massively evolved now, and it isn't that anymore. Now what it is I want people to want to take action about climate change. I want students to be empowered, and what I see from this project is a group of just incredible young people who are learning things that, from the first day when you go into a meeting with them, and you talk about what can you do, and they say the 3 R's. And then, 6 months later, when they've worked on their project, it's no longer, they don't talk about the 3 R's anymore. So yeah, this project is a school-wide project with it's about 3,000 students on it each year. So,
Okay.
and that's all across Turkey, from Istanbul to Izmir.
So what was the strategy going into it?
Well, as I say, I've worked with this school for a little while now, and I worked with the publisher that were over there. So the aim, really, the strategy is to, it's a bit of a throw spaghetti at the wall kind of strategy of try and give as many ideas for as many wide ranging projects as possible to these young students and let them develop where they can go to. So rather than going in there and saying, this is your project, this is what you have to do, and then see 3,000 carbon copies of exactly the same project.
Hmm.
The strategy is, we start out with this global meeting where we talk about um, your local town, or trash to treasure, or a 24-hour footprint was one of them, where we looked at digital and food footprints within just 24 hours. And we go out there and we propose this general idea, and from there, we give suggestions of things the students could think about. Now, remember, these are grade 5, 6, and 7. So when I said 6, 7 in those classes, they went absolutely wild. Um, so these aren't, they're not old teenagers. These are young teenagers. These are, well, they're preteens and teenagers. So their imagination, their creativity is for me is at its absolute peak. It's just
Mm.
before it gets beaten out of them with 5 pages of learning about Greeks and Romans. So the strategy there is to go in and give them ideas, but not force them into any particular project.
So when you say those, you had global meetings. So what
Well,
was that?
globe work between here and Turkey.
But I mean, so how does it work? Did you like set up big group video calls, or did you travel from school to school and have a bunch of workshops? I mean, how did you go about recruiting or gathering those 3,000 kids?
Well, so there's this school in Turkey. So it's one chain school. So they have, I think, 15 campuses across the whole country. I might be completely wrong with how many campuses they have, but I was speaking to 15 of the campuses.
Okay.
And what we do is, so at the start of the year, we set up a Zoom call with these different classes, with these different groups, and each group has like a spokespeople, and so they're in there, they're on the chat, they're speaking. Um, and we start out, as I say, in February, as it was when we did the talk. It now isn't February anymore. Uh, we start out with that, and we have this huge Zoom call with all of these different people, and then we have a recap meeting kind of halfway through the term. So around start of April, we'll probably have another chat, another Zoom call to see how things are going. And then at the end of May, they have their science fair, and I'm gonna head out to Turkey and go to not all of the different schools. I wish I could go to all of the different schools, but I'll probably manage to visit about 12 of them within a
Okay.
kind of 3-day period. So it's it's a mad 3 or 4 days where it's arrive, and it's one school, next school, next school, and we have a couple of hours in each school looking at the project, speaking to the students, and seeing how it's developed, and it's it's the most exciting,
Yeah, I can
kind
see
of.
it in your face and voice. It's amazing. It's very
Oh,
infectious, Harry.
it's brilliant. It's just amazing to see what's happened with these kids, and see these projects, and some of the stuff they come up with is just madness. It's wild.
And what about the buy-in from those 15 institutions? There's a lot of hearts and minds to win there.
Yeah.
Was there any resistance? I mean, how did you manage that?
I think because I've been working with schools in Turkey now for probably 5 years, and I've developed a really close relationship with this school, and with another set of schools, and it started out with them wanting to integrate the SDGs into their lessons. So the first couple of times I went out, the first few meetings, it was all about showing how they could introduce the SDGs, looking at the different SDGs and how they could get them into their classes. So, the the stakeholders in this, the head teachers and the directors and the owner of the school have always been into sustainability. They've
Okay,
always
that
had
helps.
this focus on it. So after a few years of visiting and going and doing the occasional workshop with them, the teachers were excited. And I tell you, one of the weirdest things when I went out there was it felt like I was some kind of celebrity, because all of the students, from a really young age, they knew who I was. There were banners saying "Welcome, Harry Waters," and they made a poem with the letters of my name. So I felt like some kind of global superstar. And I'm just a teacher that really cares. So I felt that through these few years of building up this passion, building up these ideas, the teachers had really bought into it. The key decision makers in the schools had really bought into it. So it didn't feel like there was any pushback from it, and the kids were all so into it. They were so excited to do it, and one of the really big things for me as well is they're excited to do it in English.
Okay.
These are 11, 12, 13-year olds living in Turkey, have never left Turkey. They've never, some of them may have, they've never been to an English speaking country. And they're doing these Zoom meetings in English with a fluency of English that has absolutely blows my mind, and I'll go around the schools and I'll meet the students and I'll speak to them. And they just have this passion and this drive to do what they're doing, but be able to do it in English. So they can communicate beyond their country. They want to communicate in Turkish. They want to communicate with their cousins, with their parents, with their grandparents, but they also want to take it outside of that as well. They want to be able to show what they're doing to other people around the world.
That's excellent. And also, you must be excited that COP31 is going to be in Turkey, right?
Well, let's see how the school take to that. That could be pretty wild. That could be pretty incredible. So maybe they'll get a seat at the table.
So, can you identify any like challenge or challenges that you faced? I can think of dozens, just logistically, apart from anything else. But what were the challenges that you faced whilst you were building up this network over the last couple of years or
I
last
mean,
5 years?
yeah, logistically it's Turkey. It's far away. It's not a place that there's a carbon footprint to go there. You've instantly got, you got to have that. You can't cycle to Turkey. Well, you can actually. I have a friend that cycled to Turkey. It took him 3 months though, and I'm not particularly sure. Well, A, I'd be able to do it, and B, my family would be particularly happy with me if I cycled to Turkey. So there is that instant. We have to fly there. So when we do go there, the case is of let's hit as many schools as we can in as short a space as possible, in as logical a route as possible, so we can avoid planes while we're there.
Hmm.
Because as you probably know, Turkey is massive. It's a really, really big place. So yeah, logistically, there was that, obviously. And then yeah, the other issues were taking it from moving it from being about, recycling, the 3 Rs, to being about something a bit more than that. I didn't want it to just be 15 schools across the country have a great recycling scheme, because we all know that recycling is literally the least you can do. I've got a weird thing about that phrase. When people say, "Oh, it was the least I could do," I think what they really mean is it's the most I was willing to do.
Very
And for
good.
me, when people say, I'm doing recycling, it's like it's the least you can do. No, it's the most you're willing to do, and you need to do more than just recycling. But yes, still do separate and clean your yogurt pots if you feel that's necessary. But it's more than that. That should be, the awakening, the first step. So taking it beyond that first step and making it something a bit more was a challenge at first, but you know, persistence, it pays off. And showing students, particularly with Turkey, especially a lot of the recycling that was happening in the UK a few years back was happening in Turkey.
Hmm.
It was being sent over to other places. So, raising the awareness about these issues that are happening, and showing students that, there is tremendous nature in Turkey. There
Mm.
is some absolutely wonderful things there. And when you're living in a busy city, it's difficult to see those things. So encouraging the students to look for those different areas, and those different wonderful parts of nature that they have available to them, to show them what really is amazing about the planet. And recycling, while it's a step, it's an incredibly small step. It's not even a baby step. It's a baby crawl.
And maybe even it's a thing that, is actually a tactic, I think, of the fossil fuel industry, you know, to make people feel guilty. Like, well, how can you talk about anything you don't recycle properly? And also, it is like, oh, you've recycled, so you've done your bit. So
Yeah.
just leave us alone with our incredibly destructive, extractive business models to get on with it, and you're fine because you've recycled.
Exactly, exactly. You're taking your plastic bottle outside that has used a quarter of a liter of crude oil and 3 liters of water to create, and you put it in the right bin. So you're on the right track. Definitely don't stop buying that plastic, but definitely keep putting it in the correct bin and make sure it's
Exactly.
washed.
And let's perpetuate the myth that plastic can be recycled endlessly,
Yeah, yeah,
whereas it can only be recycled once, and
yeah.
then not in all cases. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly. And then it turns into some clothes that you then wash that turn into microplastics that go straight out into the ocean. So
you
unless you have
talked
a great filter,
you talk about the three R's. So recycling is one. What are the other two?
reduce, reuse, and recycle.
Oh, that one. Okay, cool, cool, cool.
Those three R's that have been drilled into many people for I think Jack Johnson even wrote a song about it. So this idea that the three R's are the three R's, and the fact there are many more R's that we can use. And when I talk about the fossil fuel industry, I talk about R's, but yeah, they're R souls. But we won't say that on a podcast.
Okay,
Um,
okay. It's a family show, Harry. It's a
it's
family
a
show.
family show. I apologize. I definitely don't talk about that in my classroom. Thinking about, I like to start with the just refuse. There are more R's, and let's just start with refuse, because if you're not buying the stuff, if there isn't the demand for it, then you know
Exactly, exactly. Um, all right. Well, let's take a break from that project. I do want to return to it, find out a bit more about the impact it had. But let's have a little sojourn into the quick fire round. So, Harry Waters of Renewable English, what's the first word that comes to mind when I say climate?
action.
Very good. Who's your greatest inspiration in climate and nature communications?
Amy and Ella Meek from Kids Against Plastic.
Very good. Very good. I don't know about her. Um, is there someone's work out there that you think needs more attention?
Uh, Kids Against Plastic. Again, they definitely need more attention. They're amazing.
Do you have a favourite bit of culture, like a book or a movie or a TV show on environmentalism, climate or nature?
I loved Don't Look Up. I thought it was brilliant.
Very good. What's your favourite communications channel?
LinkedIn.
Okay. And do you think that's also the most effective communications channel? What do you think is the most effective communications channel for, what we want, which is mass social change?
Um, TikTok and Instagram, I imagine.
Okay. Do you have a favourite stat or fact?
I have a favorite fake stat or fact that we
Okay.
eat a credit card's worth of microplastics every week or something like that. But it's not that. That's fake, a fake fact. I don't like that one. We do eat lots of microplastics though, and they're bad.
Okay. And let's talk about fake stuff. Is there one piece of mis or information that you wish could be permanently eradicated from the earth?
Oh, I should have used that for this answer, shouldn't I? That one.
That one.
That one there. Um, should I? That means I can go with a different fact instead. Oh, now I'm on the spot thinking of a fact. That. There will be more plastic in the ocean by 2050 than fish. So I've
What's your number
reversed my
one
answers
source of
there.
climate Very good. What's your number one source of climate information?
Oof. There are too many. There are too many. Newspapers, journals, whatever is available, things that people post on, usually LinkedIn, depending on the people, obviously. Um, I, I
I
get
think
it from
LinkedIn is a
wherever I
valid
can.
one. I mean, certainly I go to LinkedIn because it's very good to check the source because you can see the career of the person who is posting that fact. And so you get immediate sort of corroborating evidence as to whether that information is genuine, I think.
Exactly.
And
Not
finally, and
chat
as a teacher, I'd
GPT.
imagine this question has many answers, but do you have a go-to analogy or metaphor for explaining the climate crisis?
Oh, okay. So for explaining the climate crisis, I like to go with an analogy to get people away from obsessing on recycling. Now I know I'm obsessing on recycling now. Um, I think my favorite analogy for that one is, if you think that you're an environmentalist because you recycle, it's a bit like saying that you're on a diet and having Diet Coke to go with your Big Mac and family bucket of unlucky fried chicken. So yeah, that's one I like to use to show people that really the impact of recycling is massively minimal, and it's been a big trick.
Very good. Very good. Um, of any of those questions, if you didn't have the pressure of it being quickfire, are there any you'd like to talk about a bit more?
Oof, I was nervous then. I was. I mean, I am wearing a hoodie, and it is quite warm here in Seville because it does get very warm. Um, Analogies. One of the analogies that I like to, well, show my students really more than tell them is, in the summer it gets warm here in Seville. You know, it hits, last year it hit 47 degrees. So I like to use my car as an oven. So I like to show people, show my students, show the teachers that I can cook in my car. I'm talking, I can cook cookies. I can bake. I can make crumbles. I can make. I've made omelets in there. I don't advise it. I've cooked pasta in there. I've warmed a pizza in there. Beans on toast. All of these different things. I like to show them that I can literally cook in my car. That is not something that should be a thing. If you can do that, it's too hot. And if you could, and the thing here is, people always say, oh, but it's always hot here. It's always hot here. But the fact is, now here in Seville, every single year, we are getting more and more days of heat wave. Now, a heat wave here is over 40 degrees. I think in the UK, it's over 30 degrees or something
Yeah.
like that. Um, the fact that I can make, you know, 25 meals in my car over the course of, 2 months means that it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And I can show them year on year that there are more of these heat waves. Yes, it's always been hot here. Yes, there have been hot days here, but it's never been like this. I've been here for 15 years now, and last year was absolutely brutal. It's
Mm.
so bad here that I escape. I go to the UK through choice. How bad must it be if I'm going to? I'm literally visiting places like Northampton, my hometown, through choice. Outrageous.
A couple of episodes ago, I was speaking to Ed Maybach, and he made a really interesting point, which is that when you take action on the climate and nature crisis, there's this idea that you're doing something that will help some near or medium or long term future. So even when you're taking action, it remains a bit abstract. But that's not actually true. So in this case, if you just started planting loads and loads and loads of trees in cities and just tried every available spare plot of spare land in a city centre, you planted a tree, immediately you'd call that city down.
Yeah.
Immediately. And I was really struck by that. And in terms of communication, maybe we need to communicate that more as well, is that these solutions have an immediate here and now effect.
Yeah, particularly in places like Seville, where they have before and after photos, which I love before and after photos. I think they're great. They're a really easy way to show people how things were before and how they are now. They can be used for the good, they can be used for the not so great. And there are lots of them, images of Seville 40 years ago, where like the big town squares had huge trees around them, and the main street had huge trees along it. There aren't so many anymore. There's loads of orange trees, which smell great in spring. It is the best smell in the world. If you can be in Seville around mid-March, it's the best smell ever. But they don't provide a huge amount of shade, and they don't cool an awful lot.
So let's return back now to your 3,000 children in Turkey. So what sort of impact have you had? Have you got any stories to tell here? What's happened?
I mean, I think behavior changes is the first one. There are very, very obvious behavior changes, not only in the students, but also in the teachers and in all of these schools. They've implemented, number one, environmental education into their classes. So this is a huge impact, a massive change where, you know, they're now learning about it. They're now actively focusing on the challenges that lay ahead, and how they can do better with those different things. And there are these different students who some of their challenges they've come up with, meat-free meals, where this idea that they're not going to eat meat is not a punishment or anything like that, but they're going home to their families and they're saying, can we take some days without meat? One of the challenges I said was a reduced meat diet. Try and reduce the meat that you have for a week. And one of the students came out with an entirely plant-based one with images of all of the different meals that they'd had. This was from last year's challenge, so I wonder what this year they're going to come up with. Um, so yeah, that one individual person, I know it's only one person, but they had removed meat from their entire family's diet for a full week. you know After you've done it for a week, I mean, it's the whole thing of veganuary, isn't it? After you've done it for a week or a month, it makes it easier to do, even if it's not on a permanent basis. But you have those ideas where, okay, well, maybe don't need sausages with this, or maybe I don't need nitrates and bacon with this. Maybe I can have something that's slightly healthier and isn't going to cause bowel cancer when I turn 35. I turned 35 a long time ago, by the way. So, and I don't have that. So it's the impact that I've seen is this behavior change and this emotional engagement that I've seen the students have with these different areas as well, because you can't go in as a teacher to a classroom and tell 30 students that plastic is bad and they all need to hate plastic, because they're not all going to engage with that. I mean, unless they're 6 to 9 years old, when they're much more easily influenced and you can basically tell them what to think. um, it goes beyond that. So you have to find these different areas, and seeing what these different students have become engaged with. And I'm really excited this year, to see last year's fifth graders who this year are sixth graders, to see the different like trajectory they've taken, see if they've continued along the lines they did last year. A group of them last year made upcycled fashion. They genuinely took their old clothes and turned them into new things, and they were wearing these things, and they turned their old jeans into handbags, and so they're learning new skills with this as well. They're learning how to sew. They're learning all of these different things, so that they've got the behavior change, the emotional engagement, and hopefully like a long-term ripple effect. Now, policy shifts within the school is one thing. Are they going to take it to the next level? I know it's not the easiest thing to do in Turkey to get policy change. It's not the most flexible government in the world, and I know that's a challenge with lots of different countries. Um, But hopefully, in that case, it can inspire, local changes that can hopefully become slightly bigger.
And this is a perfect example of how action drives a change in beliefs, not the other way around. You have to take action first, and then belief follows. So that's brilliant. That's brilliant. How did you I mean, how do you measure your impact? How do you
Uh,
report back to your funders?
oh well, for me, the funders are the people who send me out there. So it's mostly the schools and the and the publishers. So they are there. They are on the ground. They can see the changes that are happening. They can see the impact right there. So for me, in that case, in that instance, it's a very simple thing to do, because they can see the impact. They can almost taste the impact if they sample one
Amazing.
of those delicious plant-based meals.
Amazing. Um, okay, so specifically from a communication standpoint, because that's who our audience is, you know, what do you think that you've learnt from this project that might help a climate communicator, well, certainly working in plastics or working in climate justice or working trying to influence policy? Are any kernels of wisdom that you can share with us?
Um, get your message to as many people as possible in an engaging way, and get those people who you've got it to, get them to take the action. It doesn't need to cut. The action shouldn't be coming only from you. It should be coming from others as well, because that way the message will spread faster. It will spread further. So make sure people are armed with ideas. I think that's my main kind of skill, I guess, is arming others with ideas so they can then develop those ideas and take it on to the next level. And don't just say, hey, look what I've done. I've done this really cool thing and it's brilliant and it's great and I'm amazing. Look at me. No, let other people, take a nugget of wisdom perhaps and say, look what we've done. It's because these really cool people helped us. He's got a lovely beard. He doesn't have any hair, but yeah. So, it's all about making sure that these ideas, they're not just from you, but they come from other people as well.
Yeah, Stephanie Speck, in episode 1 of our podcast, talked about how the importance of volume as well. So that's interesting. Well, look, thank you for sharing that. And for the final section of the podcast, we're now going to move on to sort of more general stuff. I'm really interested in your opinions. I think they're really, it's really interesting to get the perspective of someone who's there with people who are starting out on their climate action journey. So, to what extent do you see like the future of climate and nature communications? What do you see the future of in your field, climate education?
Um, in climate education, I think we need to, we need to keep banging the drum, and we need to keep making sure that it isn't just in science class where students learn about. We need to move away from simply awareness and move into agency. Climate communication has always been about convincing people about a problem.
Hmm.
But we don't need to just convince people about a problem. People who deny the the climate crisis are doing so for their own personal gain, not through ignorance. It's very obvious. We can all see it. So, but we need to make sure that we take these ideas and we show people. We make sure we show people the different crossovers as well. We need to ensure that people know about the climate crisis connected to mental health. The climate crisis connected to physical health, the connections with business, with culture, with fashion, with sport. All of these different things. We need to ensure that we are communicating that climate is connected to everything.
Mm. I totally agree. I totally agree. We need to get outside of our silos. And is there hope there? Do you think that we're gonna do that? We're gonna bake climate and nature into all subjects?
There's hope in some places. There is hope in some places. There is again. It's often, sadly, it's done on like a micro scale of a few teachers.
Mm.
will take that idea. A few teachers will move forward with that idea. So it will be speckled across classrooms, but it needs to be on a macro level. It needs to come into, national curricula across the world. It needs to be demanded by politicians. It needs to be demanded by high stakes investors as well to get this into the brains of our youth, because it's utterly essential.
This is maybe a slightly cliche question, but I think these questions are important. What's the best bit of advice that you've ever received?
Oh, um, I think this is a very important one as well, that's developing within climate communications, and that's not to take yourself too seriously. Um,
Hey.
you may or may not realize that I don't take myself particularly seriously. And there's a lot of things that I don't take seriously, and I love that there has been an increase in climate comedy, we could say, people coming up with these, reels and these different ideas that have a much lighter view on, what we are engaging with. It's a different type of storytelling. Rather than going with fear, we go with comedy, because it still raises awareness. It still shows people that there are these issues out there. But well, if you don't laugh, you cry, don't you? So, yeah, I think that's probably the best bit of advice. Don't take myself too seriously. So I try my hardest not to.
One of my favorite phrases is that life is way too important to be taken seriously.
Exactly.
And if you've got any advice to like anybody starting out in their career in climate communications, they've just finished their degree or their postgrad, and they're going out for the first time and they're trying to win the hearts and minds of as many people as possible in their career, like what would be a bit of advice that you would give to them?
Be yourself. 100% be yourself. You cannot be, you can't be anyone else. So just be unashamedly yourself. If you're a bit of a clown and you like clowning around, then do that. If you're a super serious person, then be serious. Don't take yourself seriously necessarily, but be serious, and don't try and be what you're not. And focus on what's important to you. Maybe the climate crisis, the poly crisis, whatever you want to call it, has so many different areas. And as a climate educator, I have to find ways of teaching people about those different areas. But if you are simply working on one thing, focus on that one thing. Focus on that one thing you really love. And make make your communication about people, not polar bears. No, I have no problem. I love polar bears.
Mm.
In fact, my dog looks almost exactly like a polar bear, and I love them. But one of the main reasons I got into climate education was I was in a classroom one day, and I opened my textbook to the climate page. It was about the ice caps melting and the polar bears dying, which is awful, absolutely terrible. But I want to ask you, how many 13-year-old Spanish kids here in Seville really care about that? They don't. They don't care about that. So make it about people and not necessarily about polar bears, unless your niche is polar bears, in which case make it all about polar bears.
That's an absolutely brilliant ending. But before we go, I've got one final question. So I really want to get into like you, Harry, and your job. So I know today is Sunday, so it's probably not today, but say tomorrow morning, what's the first thing on your to-do list? What's the first thing you have to do tomorrow morning?
Going for a wee doesn't count, I guess.
Doesn't, no, no.
it, it is absolutely essential. Every single morning when I wake up, I come downstairs, and well, you can't see behind me, but in my office I've got my yoga mat set up. So first thing to do is always yoga, always ground myself, always make sure that I am ready to go forward. And from that, my first thing to do work wise is finish off preparing a session that I'll be delivering in Portugal about empowering sustainable citizens. So that I'll be doing with National Geographic Learning. So that's first on my work to-do list after my bending and stretching and meditating.
Harry, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom. And links to Harry's work will be in the notes at the bottom. So please follow him. And if you can help in some way, reach out to him. But Harry, thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.